Dr. Musa Manga, Assistant Professor in the Department of Environmental Science and Engineering at Gillings School of Public Health. Dr. Musa will explain about research at his lab and also how prospective students can join his lab. Please proceed, Dr. Musa, and you have 20 minutes to present. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You can share your screen. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I'll share my screen and I'll try to take it a bit slow. Many thanks to Jonathan. He has actually mentioned some of the key things I was going to talk about. But still, I'll talk about some of the things which are actually very key to environmental sciences and engineering and my lab as per se. So let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know which screen I'm sharing, but let me hope I'm sharing the slides. Is it the slideshow?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sylvia, for organizing this. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak to some of our potential students. I'll try to make it very brief. I know you gave me 20 minutes, and I'll try to fit within the 20 minutes. I've just given this presentation a title, From Indonesia to UNC, ES&E, and I'll explain to you what that means. And what do you benefit? Basically, you come here, you learn environmental sciences and engineering, and then you're going to protect the environment and public health. Myself, I am Dr. Musa Manga, and I've been at UNC for over 8 years, and I'll talk about that as we try to navigate through this presentation. You'll excuse my teaching. I'm used to starting with giving an outline, what the presentation is going to be. So still I would do that by saying I'm going to talk about who Dr. Manga is briefly. I'll give an overview of the ESE department, and then I'll talk about Dr. Manga's lab. What exactly do they do? What do they focus on? And kind of the team that we have in that lab. And what do you need to do to join that lab? And then I'll talk about my mentorship style. And that will be one slide where I'll just talk about two things, given my experience and my background. And then I'll give a conclusion. So who is Dr. Manga? So one of the things I need to talk about here, I am an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering, but I am an engineer by training. And because of that training, I work at the intersection of public health and environment. But then I'm going to dive into that as we go through. But ideally, what I do is I use environmental engineering and microbiology tools to identify low-cost, scalable, sustainable interventions that we can use to see how we can intercept the release of pathogens to the environment and how do we protect public health. So basically, it's more of thinking through how you apply the engineering skills and the microbiology tools and some of the chemistry tools, because they work together to try to protect public health and the well-being. And I usually focus more on water, sanitation, hygiene, and fecal sludge management practices. So basically, I look at how do we improve the planning, how do we look at monitoring, how do you actually try to put this into the context. But then we're trying to look at trying to promote 4 aspects. One, how do we promote equity for underserved communities? 2, how do we try to develop and validate pathogen hazards? And then 3, we try to look at environmental justice and climate change mitigation. And then 4 is something to do with what I'm very much excited about is optimization of treatment of this wastewater, resource recovery, and so on. It's very brief there, but I'm going to unpack those 4 research points that we look at. The other thing I want to talk about is basically to talk about the other aspect, which is to do with the department that I'm in. When I talk about Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering, the question comes in, what is this exactly? So I'm just going to talk about the department. I know Jonathan has given an overview of this department. So this department was founded in 1921, and it's the only department in the Gillings School of Public Health, which is focusing on engineering. But the mission we have as a department is basically trying to think through how can we enhance environmental solutions to enhance public health, well-being, but also look at how do we improve the resilience in the face of climate change and climate and environmental change. There's a lot of things changing. So we're trying to look at how do we come up with these solutions to make sure we can protect the public health and the well-being in that aspect. So more about the department, we have about 35 faculty in just the Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering. And we have more than 220 students in this kind of department. And because it's a big department, I'll just try to give you an overview of the different themes, research themes we have in this department, and the different faculty that fall under each theme. So what you see here, one of the themes is characterization of the environment. Basically, the faculty you see there are the ones that look at how do we characterize the chemical contaminants. We look at infectious agents and also look at their transportation into air, water, humans, and workplaces. As much as some have themes, but people cross-cut the different themes. And you can reach out to any of those if they're actually working in the area you want. The other theme we have is the one that focuses on understanding mechanisms for chemical transformation and disease kind of causes. And you could see the kind of different faculty we have that focus on that specifically. And then we have another theme, which is engineering solutions. And under that, that's the theme I fall. That doesn't mean I don't work on other aspects, but that's my main or my core, is how do we engineer a solution to mitigate the impacts of climate change, on air, on water, on health, and other aspects. And then the last one is the one that translates everything that's being done to policy, to practice. So we have a team that focuses on that, but also these other people working on these other things work to use that evidence to transform into policy and practice. But let me talk about Dr. Manga exactly. I've just taken one of my lab and one of my students who was actually working in the lab. So that's one of my lab space that people work in. And I've got 2 labs which actually look at all these aspects. And I'm going to talk about what exactly do we do. But I won't talk about it until I talk about what is the team like. So I have a diverse team. And I have got 2 PhD students. I've got a research assistant who is already working there. I've got master students, about 5 of them. I've got undergrads who are actually working in my lab. Those are also 5. Then I've got those that have finished and have left. What you see here is a diverse lab. I have people of different backgrounds, all working in my lab. And that's because my lab is inclusive. And that's the same thing for Gillings and the department as well. We have an inclusive environment that we welcome everyone from different backgrounds to work within, to our community. And if I talk about what I'm going to focus on is giving you a brief overview of what exactly do we do in my lab. So I just need to remind some of you who are not in WASH that if you're exposed to pathogens, the chances are high you're going to fall sick. And therefore, exposure to fecal pathogens has been responsible for about 2.2 billion people annually. And this is, this is happening because we're seeing a group of, kind of burden of disease happening, and all these people are being affected. And therefore, what we do is we need to focus on how do we intercept or reduce this. So what we focus on is sanitation infrastructure, water infrastructure, hygiene infrastructure, to see how to stop the spread of these kind of disease-causing organisms. That seems simple, but it's a broader area of research that this involves us planning, monitoring, and improving water, sanitation, and hygiene practices. So my lab does all that. So far, I have worked in across 4 continents. So currently, my research is working, is running in all those kind of countries. 14 countries currently, I have research working in each of those countries, having some research going on right now, and we keep expanding. I have not updated this, but we have got other research going on in the Philippines, which we need to add, in Cambodia, and all those kind of research going on right now. But let's talk about exactly what do I do when I say WASH. So the first thing I want to talk about is the WASH infrastructure, but I will use sanitation infrastructure in my talk. One of the aspects I look at is understanding pathogen flow in environments. I look at development of pathogen hazards. I look at risk models, and how do I help to intercept these to stop exposure to pathogens and MR genes. We've done a couple of work. We've already done some work in India, which is already put out there for people to understand how do we control this. We have another work that we did in Maputo, that's MAPSAN, and we're probably talking about what do we see in the environment. And we have another one where we looked at the global aspect to understand how these pathogens flow. And another one we just finished in China, where we're trying to look at how systems work to intercept these pathogens. Another area I look at, it's looking at how do we have equitable, access? How do we improve access to WASH, especially in the marginalized communities, in people with low and middle income communities, to reduce on the release of pathogens. So we try to see how we can control that. So we've had some work that has happened in South Africa, that's Johannesburg. We have some work that has happened in India as well. And the other one, which happened in the whole Southern Eastern Asia. So we try to look at that. We've also done some work which looks at Europe, understanding Europe itself, what is happening to these communities. And we've done some in Zambia, Ethiopia, and India as well. And then also try to look at, Asian Pacific regions, understanding how these things work. And lastly, we did one in the Freetown for the map, the sanitation master plan. So we're doing a lot of work across different continents. The other thing we try to do when we push again to look at equity, we've done other work in the US itself, where we know it's not only in the low and middle income countries, even we have marginalized communities in the US, and we've tried to understand what are these social barriers to safe access to sanitation. We've also tried to go ahead and look at 34 low and middle income countries. Put all of those together, try to understand what are the barriers to improving access to some of the things we do. So we've looked at several aspects across the globe, trying to understand this. And therefore, the students we do get in my group, or even ES&A and Gillings at large, is we look at global problems, not only US where you come, but you look at the different challenges across the globe. The other thing we focus on in my lab is we look at climate change, and we look at how do we, improve the resilience. And this is happening across the globe. There's a changing climate and environment. So we try to look at that, and we've done a couple of work trying to see how to improve this. And we've worked in Solomon Islands. We've also worked in Kenya recently, and we've just finished a mission meta-analysis for the whole to inform the IPCC, guidelines to say, let's think about how we look at this infrastructure. So all those kind of work comes in whereby students do the modeling of aspects. We get the data, we model, we start to inform global, indicators. The other thing I do enjoy most is bioresource recovery, which brings in all my engineering to try to understand how to improve treatment, how do we, enhance nutrients recovery to feed into agriculture, food security, and all that? How do we look at bioenergy to change whatever was a waste into a resource? So we've done a couple of studies here. We've tried to look at treatment of, waste itself using black soda flies. We've looked at filtering media, which is like kind of low-cost treatment facilities. We've looked at using biochar itself as a novel way to treat on-site sanitation systems. We've looked at a lot of things to do with nutrients. How do we recover nutrients from this waste? So a couple of work has been conducted, and then we've moved all the way to look at anaerobic digestion and see how do we get energy. So a couple of work has been going on already on how to get nanoparticles, even to have them included in construction itself, by looking at all different aspects that come into play with resource recovery. So in brief, that's kind of what our lab focuses on. 4 dimensions: climate change, bioresource recovery, hazards flow models, and improvement of access in underserved communities. But we do a lot more beyond that. One of the things we do is we encourage working with communities, because we want to come up with solutions that community has been involved, because these are very key in having them to be inclusive. So that's something we really focus on every time we try to do some of these activities. But let me summarize by talking about some of the programs or some of the projects that are running. One of them right now we have is we're looking at fecal sludge, but we're trying to use probiotics to improve on the treatment of fecal sludge, especially in communities where people have challenges to access emptying. We also have a project which is going on, which is looking at unsafe return of human waste to the environment. And therefore, what we're doing here is people work in the wash sector, they must have heard of what they call the SFD and the indicators given by GMP for monitoring access to wash. So we're trying to work with World Health Organization to inform their indicators, and we're trying to move forward that as well. Another one we do is we're trying to look at pathogens. We're looking at, soil transmitted helminths, and we're trying to understand how do these affect pregnant women. We're looking at, human settlements and so on and so forth. But also look at shared sanitation, which is informing GMP sanitation monitoring standards to tell them what indicators we think they can be able to use. So we're trying to advise them, and we're working with them to inform that. The other one we have is we're looking at biosolids composting and biosolids biodegradation, and we are focusing more on how do we recover nutrients, how do we inactivate pathogens, how do we remove emerging contaminants. We also have sanitation infrastructure, resilience, whereby we have a changing environment, but we're looking at what could be the impacts when that happens, and so many other aspects. We're looking at black soda flies as well. We're looking at them as a way to treat waste, and we're adding in biochar. And this is mostly to see how do we optimize, do we engineer solutions, solve some of the problems we do have. We also try to look at biochar as a way to try to remove PFAS from the solid waste, digestate, and others. So one of the projects is already running is we're trying to use biochar, and we're trying to use it to treat human waste, wastewater in underserved communities, and all that are things we try to do. Another project we're doing is using geobags, so which we are trying to come up with geobags that could help with treatment and volatilization of fecal sludge in communities where people have access, where access is challenging. So that kind of things we're trying to look at. We've looked at PFAS as well. And so we're doing quite a lot of aspects in the lab. I want to summarize by talking about the key important things which everyone wants to hear about. How do you join the lab to start working with us on such aspects? One of the things I would advise is, as a student, you need to step back, identify your PhD research interest. We don't expect you to start thinking about exactly what you're going to execute, because things change along the way. Step back, think about what do you want to do? What interests you to do? One of the things I keep telling my students is, do not come to a PhD to do something you don't want. It's always good to do something that you love. because that's going to encourage you, or it's going to give you a drive to wake up in the night and get something done. It's going to give you a drive to stay in the lab until late to get something done. So I usually encourage students to do something that interests them. And in my lab, actually, I welcome individual ideas that I can help you build your dream and your passion. So when you think through what you want to do, just have the idea identified. The next thing is prepare. So before you reach out to me, sit back, read about the lab itself you want to join. Read about your research idea so you can have ways to show your potential supervisor that you understand what you want to do. And then once you do that, prepare your CV. I don't expect you to have an superb CV, but make sure at least in your CV, you highlight your academic background. You tell us your profession, if you have any professional research experience. List any publications if you have any. And that is really key. So don't waste your time writing a long CV without key aspects we need to see. We need to see what's your background, what skills do you have. Then once you've done that, prepare a statement of interest. You don't have to prepare that when you're reaching out to me. That's not, if you don't have it, don't worry. Just have your CV and have about the research and reach out to us. Then the other thing you need to do is reach out to me. That's my email. You could actually expect a response in 72 hours. If you don't receive a response, please resend your email. Either I'm out of office on maybe field work, or I'm away for something. Resend that email. But it's very important to mention if you have any funding as well. So when you have the funding already, it's important to mention that you already have funding, because that's another way that some of the researchers, if you're doing an idea, they probably want to know, are you funded? Are we going to fund you? And so on and so forth. And then the other thing, what comes next is we shall schedule a Zoom meeting. Because once you reach out to me, I'm going to respond saying, can we meet to discuss your idea in detail for me to understand it and then discuss your skills. So that's something really focused for. And one other thing I want to show is my lab accepts people of different academic backgrounds. So if you're an environmental engineer, or if you have environmental microbiology, or you've done chemical engineering, we've done agriculture, water. So all these are kind of people that we accept, even another field, as long as you're working on, you have the skill set that I can support to develop you into an independent researcher. Along those lines, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. The last one is mentorship. So I made this as my last slide for two reasons. My mentorship is informed by my diverse background and my study. I studied in 3 continents. I studied in Europe, in England. I studied in the US. I studied way back in Africa. So I've been in 3 continents. So because of that, I've been learning a lot of ways on how to deal with students. So that informs my mentorship. The other thing is I have been an international student all my life. So I understand the challenges international students face. So I really understand that. And because of that, my mentorship is inclusive, it's participatory, it's a teamwork. We work one-on-one with a student to make sure I understand their weaknesses and see how I can support them. And we have also peer-to-peer learning, which also comes in place in how do we support you to develop a skill you don't have. And if you notice on most of the publication I shared, you may see that there are more than one author on those publications. All of them are my students, that some are learning from the others as we work on a publication. So those are kind of things we do. And otherwise, thank you so much. And think about WASH, because that matters to public health. Thank you.
Dr. Musa, big applause. I personally really grateful that you take your